Welcome to the New Cyber Frontier, bringing you the latest news and initiatives that focus on the development of cybersecurity economics. You don't have to be a computer or cybersecurity expert to get plugged in. Your host brings it straightforward, asks the tough questions, and brings the cyber world to a level of understanding for everyone. You can find us on the web at www.newcyberfrontier.com. Now join our host as he introduces the topic for today's New Cyber Frontier.
Welcome to today's episode of New Cyber Frontier. On today, we start a series with the IEEE blockchain on transactive energy. And today's is using blockchain. Today is the first of that series that we're recording, at least. I don't know if you hear them in the same order or not, but have some exciting guests on with me. But today we're talking about building the case for smart contracts. And we have Tamara Hughes, who is a principal at TMH Ventures, which is a CTO consultancy and an angel investor. So backing some great new technologies, hopefully. And also IEEE member of the standards group 2418.5, which they could talk about that a little bit, but sometimes the numbers I get lost in. But Tamara, interesting, a small town in South Dakota. As a background,
right.
We'll talk about that. But also we have on Umit Cali, who is the Associate Professor in Energy Informatics at Norwegian University Science and Technology. And he's the co-founder and CTO of Energy Exchange, and also leads the vice chair of the working group for blockchain standards, which is the P2418.5, which sure we'll talk about a little bit. But well, a lot there, a lot of very good backgrounds, and I know I didn't touch on everything we have there, especially with Umit. But welcome both of you. Thanks for joining today.
Thanks, Chris. Very excited to be here.
Thanks for the invite. Thank you very much.
Definitely. So we'll start a little bit about your background from you. Umit, why don't you start and we'll go to Tamara after that.
Sure. I do have approximately 20 years experience in technology, primarily in the field of energy, but energy informatics might be the right definition. So for almost 20 years, I have been dealing with AI applications in the field of energy, but for almost 5 years now we have a very exciting journey with blockchain together with many of the colleagues here globally, especially under our working group. So I'm currently, as you mentioned, as associate professor having some teaching activities in the similar area. We have courses on that and recently released a book about digitalization of power markets and systems from Springer. So actually our public service in the global level is our contribution to the working group with the different task forces, and probably such kind of podcast activities are also counted as byproducts of our global activities together with the colleagues as well. Very short
Definitely
message.
been a lot going on with that group that I've been a part of as well. Tamara, a little bit about your background. How do you got from that small town in South Dakota to where you're at now?
Sure. Thank you. So yeah, a small town of about 2,000 people in southeastern South Dakota, bachelor's in electrical engineering from South Dakota School of Mines and Technology. I spent the bulk of my career in technology in some role or capacity, from software engineering, writing custom operating system device drivers for the avionics, real-time embedded avionics systems at Honeywell, through a lot of the macro trends that we've seen in technology: global networking, digital content creation, delivery, web, mobile applications, streaming, storage, and digitalization of the oil field supply chain. MBA from Rice, 4 software patents along the way. Started, as everyone realizing, blockchain wasn't going away, Bitcoin, kind of springing it onto the world scene, and looking at it because of my work with the oil field services company from a supply chain perspective, and realizing there was value there beyond cryptocurrencies. And started, looking for standards organizations and places where I can contribute and participate. And, that was how I landed in the IEEE 2418.5 working group and their smart contracts, surprisingly, and the use case task forces, which, the group is really leading the charge in the application and defining the standardizations for blockchain in something other than cryptocurrency. So very excited to be working with that group.
Interesting. And we'll definitely get into today's topic after we take a break, and we'll come back and talk about smart contracts and applying those in the energy space. Be right back.
Blockframe technology offers next-generation blockchain managed trust and security. Unique non-fungible tokens are used to secure software bills of materials to provide data quality and security for every transaction in your supply chain. Deploy advanced peer-to-peer product security, scale zero trust capability to millions of IoT devices, allow vendor tracking and accountability, and rapidly reset from compromise. Unchangeable, time-sequenced blockchain data provides next-generation security using machine learning trust algorithms and audit analytics. Start securing your supply chain today by contacting Blockframe at www.blockframetech.com.
Welcome back to New Cyber Frontier. On today, talking to Tamara and Umit about smart contracts and blockchain smart contracts. How does that relate to security on New Cyber Frontier? Building the future, looking at how do we now put something together that's proactive. We know that smart contracts started on blockchain. Blockchain started what we know of cryptocurrency, but also that it is something to do with security in there, right? Or something to do with immutability. Hear those terms. The flow, the how do we come to where we're at with blockchain? We're going to turn it over to Tamara and Umit on that. Give us some background. What's the evolution look like to where we came from and how that relates to security and even energy as we're talking here. Whoever wants to start, we'll go with Umit.
All right, thank you very much. So actually, I will be starting from surprisingly very old time, ancient times, but I wouldn't keep the discussion in that ancient time that long in order to have the consistency. Actually, all this law of codex started approximately 4,000 years ago in Mesopotamia in Sumerian kingdom. Probably you may know Hammurabi Codex or Hammurabi King Hammurabi from Babylon or in general from Sumerian society, which they were the inventors of many other stuff like writing, numerical systems, and many other stuff. And surprisingly, or not surprisingly, they were the inventors of the law of codex. But King Hammurabi was not the first guy. Approximately in 2050 before Christ, more than 4,000 years ago, the code of Ur-Nammu before Hammurabi, he was the first guy who invented the law of codex. Of course, at that time they didn't have even paper. They started to process such kind of law of codex for the entire state and government, of course, on stone. Right? This is the first version of the contract. Just before it was the origin, the state law. But before the state law, there had been a first sales contract approximately 120 years ago before Ur-Nammu. It was also on paper, on stone, I would say clay, but later on it became like a stone. So this was the start. Of course, we had other civilizations like Roman Empire and Anglo-Saxon law and US law and many other countries. They have their own version of law. We started to develop our own contracts, national and international contracts on paper. And at the same time, like on digital versions like PDF and many other digital versions. So, but the storyline that we would like to refer to would be starting with a very interesting scientist. Let's give the credit to Nick Szabo. He is a computer scientist and at the same time lawyer from the west coast of the United States. He came up with the first definition of smart contracts in 1990s. I think this is the beginning of the story. But later on, probably after further discussions about the definitions, we can come back to the applications like Ethereum based or Hyperledger based. So this is the very quick summary of the entire timeline, I would say, very quickly.
And I'll add on to that then, with that background, then what's the definition today of what's a smart contract? Mm-hmm. And in Nick Szabo's words, it's a computerized transaction protocol that executes the terms of a contract, which will come back to what a contract is. specific definition. The general objectives of a smart contract are to satisfy common contractual conditions such as payment terms and minimize the need for trusted intermediaries. And at a lower level, a smart contract really is just computer code that, given specified conditions, if then else conditions, it's capable of running automatically to fulfill pre-specified functions. And the code can be stored or processed on a distributed ledger, and it generally writes any resulting changes. So anything that it modifies as far as existing transactions, it writes those changes back to the distributed ledger.
Interesting. So we went really through that history of smart contracts and what a contract is, where it came from, and in point now where it's digital. Can you connect that for our listeners to blockchain a little bit better?
Let's try to. Actually, if we come back to the first original document, which had been just published with probably unknown writers, even though we know the name, Satoshi, in 2008 and 9, in the paper, he or they or she just mentioned about the first definitions of blockchain. And actually, one of the first very important feature of blockchain is building the trust in an immutable track recording way, where we have digital track records distributed to the users. Of course, it depends on the DLT, distributed ledger technology, which is the general terminology of blockchain as a main tree or stream. In this case, of course, if we are talking about digital contracts where we don't have DLT or blockchain as like immutable track recorder or building, which builds the trust, it is digital. It might have cybersecurity concerns, digital signatures, but the main difference between such kind of even sophisticated, very sophisticated digital contracts and the DLT-based digital contract is just using the so-called on-chain mechanism, which is the core of the everything. If we are looking at the anatomy of the entire system, where we immutably, of course, theoretically you can break the system, but I'm talking about under normal conditions. We keep the track record of entire track recording of everything, including the smart contract, in the blocks in an immutable way and distribute it to the users. So in this case, this allows us to, I will just add some information that Tamara mentioned. It allows us to just convert the business codex or business rules or engineering rules or social rules, because it depends on if you would like to use it for governmental purposes. It's not entirely engineering domain, but it can smart contracts can be used for that purpose as well. So we convert the business rules and everything into the logic of the smart contracts, and then just process them inside the immutable track recording system of distributed ledger technology, and just link them in a proper way so that we can track record it if needed, depending on the system that we will be looking for, and just enable the probably legal use of it later on. Probably we will discuss the legal use of this legal aspect later on. Yeah.
Okay, so good connection there. Thanks for giving that little bit of explanation. Now we're looking at it in the energy industry. So Tamara, how does that, everything that we've heard so far and what Umit just explained, how is that of value? Where does that become valuable to energy?
Right. So this is where blockchain and the value of blockchain starts to, bubble to the surface for the energy industry in general. So if we look at things like transactive energy and the proliferation of distributed energy resources and the rise of the prosumer, which is somebody who is both a producer of energy and a consumer of energy, blockchain starts to manifest as a effective and efficient mechanism or technology for optimizing and bringing greater efficiencies into some of those scenarios. So, with an overall goal of facilitating or streamlining existing energy markets, as well as potentially driving new energy markets, and ultimately reducing operational costs while enhancing grid resiliency and reliability, security at the same time. That's where we start looking at blockchain. We've got various groups, if you will, that the 2418.5 working group is exploring as far as groups of use cases, including things like asset tracking, right? So installing a utility scale battery at a distribution substation, there's, at least in ERCOT, there's a lot of paperwork, a lot of data that has to be captured and is recorded in multiple enterprise systems. So that's an example where a blockchain, a decentralized, accessible ledger could write once, read everywhere kind of scenario. Renewable energy certificates trading is another, big bucket of potential for blockchain DLT and smart contracts. I mentioned a little bit the prosumers, so we talk about and the proliferation of distributed energy resources, so decentralized and peer-to-peer energy trading, getting into the financial side around settlement and billing, and then the world of EV charging and management, a little bit of, especially in the mobility scenario where your car is not necessarily being charged at the same charging station all the time, and where blockchain can facilitate tracking of the vehicle moving and the electricity consumed to charge the battery, or if there's a grid service available where the battery from the car is being used to provide power back to the grid. So those are some of the high level use cases that the working group is exploring for the uses of blockchain in the grid space.
Interesting. Let's take a break here from our sponsors. We'll be right back. We want to unwrap this a little bit. Be right back.
Blockframe Technology offers next-generation blockchain-managed trust and security. Unique non-fungible tokens are used to secure software bills of materials to provide data quality and security for every transaction in your supply chain. Deploy advanced peer-to-peer product security, scale zero trust capability to millions of IoT devices, allow vendor tracking and accountability, and rapidly reset from compromise. Unchangeable, time-sequenced blockchain data provides next-generation security using machine learning trust algorithms and audit analytics. Start securing your supply chain today by contacting Blockframe at www.blockframetech.com.
Welcome back to New Cyber Frontier. On today with Tamara Hughes and Umit Cali, talking about the use of blockchain and energy securing transactions. We went through quite a good explanation of prosumer and consumers, producers. We want to unpack a little bit and understand some of these technical terms in the energy industry that relate to how we would use blockchain, because so much of it sound like optimizing companies, making society better. The prosumer, the producer, and the consumer become kind of interwoven here. Let's unpack that a little bit and explain the value to individuals. I think we understand the value to society and to companies and whatnot, but kind of break it down a little bit and say, now blockchain makes peer-to-peer. What does that mean to the average person, and how can we interrelate?
So it's a great question. Actually, traditionally, our power system is supposed to be one-directional system where we had bulk generators from one side, like thermal or hydroelectric power plants or nuclear power plants, and it didn't allow us 2 decades ago, I would say approximately, to have two-directional power flow. So where we have a transmission distribution systems, and depending on where you are talking about, ISO in the United States and Europe, TSO, DSO, and we had the consumers, and traditionally, like, the consumers had been just like using the energy. But now, for almost more than a decade, I would say almost 2 decades, right now we have two-directional power flow. That means even just normal users or consumers, if we have photovoltaic panels at rooftop, if it is connected to the grid, then we are the producers and the users of consumers of electrical power. So that the prosumer terminology is originating from that fact. So the second important thing is this is bidirectional or two-way power flow, and which is also making the power flow calculations and the entire physical system a little bit more complicated. But we are talking about cyber physical system where we have telecommunication systems, and at the same time AI or distributed ledger technology, it is our focus today. where we have a very perfect match of technologies, which is decentralized, like our systems right now, with electric vehicles, with like prosumers, and we have also aggregators as new players. And the definition of aggregator is changing as well, right? It can be a software company, DSO owned or community owned. Therefore, I think this is our grid is changing and evolving, and there will be new markets, local markets, which will be supplementary to the regional retail market and at the same time wholesale market. We do have legal issues still to be resolved in order before we will have full functional local markets. But this is the trend, especially in Germany, which was leading a country like with feed-in tariffs and additional subsidies. They're about to cancel the feed-in tariff and come up with probably some feature version of the local markets, which is coming right now in the United States as well. Right, for quarter 22 is also showing the same direction. Let me stop here, and probably there will be other extensions of these discussions as well. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So that kind of comes back to now everybody's a producer, everybody's a consumer, and the contract. So now becomes legally binding between two people, whether you're on a house selling your power for 2 hours to the grid or to another individual that's using it across the grid, just using the grid as a transfer. And now that contract part becomes important. So Tamara, I think you had some insight on that and the kind of the legal aspects of that. How do we foresee that kind of moving forward?
Right. So let's go back to the definition of a smart contract from Nick Szabo, which is a smart contract is a computerized transaction protocol that executes the terms of a contract, where implied to that is a legally binding contract. Okay, so what makes a contract? So a paper contract you sign today, a mortgage or equivalent. What makes it legally binding? So generally accepted in the global setting is that a contract to be legally binding has to contain certain elements. And most jurisdictions, those elements include an offer, consideration, acceptance, and a mutuality of obligation, which means you show that you are agreeing to enter into a legal relationship. Okay, so offer, consideration, and acceptance, and then I'm agreeing to enter into this relationship. So how does that translate into computer code? And there have been a lot of people, a lot of very smart people looking at this to make sure that it can translate into computer code, and what, if anything, needs to change with existing legal systems to facilitate that. The UK, I think, has been leading the charge on some of the efforts, or at least they're more vocal about their efforts in this. And in fact, just last Thursday, on the 25th, their law commission published their analysis of the existing legal system in the context of smart contracts, and indicated that smart legal contracts are capable of meeting the requirements for the formation of a legally binding contract under the current law in England and Wales. That's critical. That's important. That means everything as it exists today in the legal system, a smart contract can become a legal smart contract without significant change to existing law. The only area that they acknowledge needs more definition, and this is somewhat obvious when you think about it, is dispute resolution. Mm-hmm. So what jurisdiction, if we look at the United States, and you start thinking about the federal law, state law, and then we get into the regulatory side where you have FERC, NERC, and the PUCs, who has jurisdiction in the case of a dispute? So that's the area where further definition is needed. But regardless, I think this is a pretty significant step forward as it regards acceptance of a legal smart contract by existing legal systems.
That is interesting. So now, if I'm just kind of reaching for some connection to the technology, when we think about somebody, go back to my example of somebody with a solar cell that gives power across the grid, somebody else accepts it. Those communications, that contract, if we got to execute them on a distributed ledger, need to be really quick and happen in seconds, and find an agreement, a user, a supplier, and millions of these going back and forth between users and suppliers. how does the existing execution environments and constraints with smart contracts in the blockchain environment, are we ready for this?
Yes and no. So this is where we get into the challenges of scalability with some of the existing blockchain technologies. So Bitcoin is at a 6 or 10 transactions per second. I mean, Ethereum, as it exists now, they're slow rolling to Ethereum 2.0 and changing the underlying consensus mechanism. But that's rolling to from about 10 transactions per second to, in theory, 10,000 transactions per second. But there are purpose-built blockchains that were built specifically to address the transaction, the throughput issue. So, existing commercial technologies that are out there that are capable of, tens of thousands of transactions per second to overcome that. But that is a significant consideration when, starting to look at the implementation and which blockchain technology specifically will be used for any given use case.
Yep. Let me elaborate some points as well. If we divide the territory into two pieces, centralized databases and decentralized, and the protocols which are satisfying the trust are the proof of X or the consensus mechanism. Some of them are very heavily computational intensive, and also they use electrical power as well. For instance, proof of work. And we have also lighter versions of it, like proof of authority, which is approximating to the centralized databases, and the boundaries are becoming a little bit fuzzy and gray. So over there, it depends on the designer of the entire system. Do we need that trust? If we don't need that trust, it is better to use like something close to the centralized databases, like on the right-hand corner of the spectrum, like proof of authority. At the same time, the second rule, when we design it, the on-chain section of our design shall be as light as possible, so that we can reach the transmission per second values, TPS values, up to 20,000, which is reasonably good. But sometimes it is inevitable that we need to build trust with more high computational power, like validators. Then we should go and sacrifice to the left-hand side. It's a matter of how we will apply. There is a balance. There is no straightforward way. Yeah.
Okay. So how you guys are working quite a bit in the standards, and I know, Umit, you chair this standards group. How are we moving that technology discussion towards something that is feasibly executable, scalable?
Yes, I'm co-chairing, but I think Tamara has also some especially the very detailed information about the task forces about that. But short summary, as a vice chair with Dr. Claudio Lima, we have various task forces like use cases and interoperability, smart contracts, and cybersecurity. Especially the smart contract use case task force is very integral part of our working group. Probably Tamara would like to talk more about the task force smart contracts in connection with standards as well. Yep.
Sure. Thanks, Umit. Yeah. So, as we look at standardization and the role standardization plays, let's consider for a moment the traditional IT world. So nobody even thinks about how a web application is going to talk to another web application, or what interfaces there are, if you will, for when you pop open a website on your browser. It's HTTP, it's TCP/IP, it's those things are just, they're standard. In the energy world, an equivalent, or in the grid world, an equivalent would be IEEE 2030.5, a communications protocol that is standard. It doesn't matter what the underlying implementation, if you're using Python or Java or C or C++, none of that matters. It's adhering to the protocol. So that's where we're trying to go with with smart contracts, is defining the, for the use cases that the working group is establishing. What does the smart contract need to look like? What does it encompass? What does it have to contain in order to be a smart contract that meets the standard? And it gets a little interesting with smart contracts because, as we've discussed, it's not just the technical aspect, like if this is the offer, if the bid ask is this, then the transaction occurs. It's also, what are the legal and regulatory aspects that come into play in the smart contract? What else has to be included to fulfill those obligations. And in some cases, that may be, here's what's being proposed to be included in the smart contract, because the regulatory side may still be playing a little bit of catch up. But in, at a sort of high level, where does that fit in? So with the working group, what we're trying to do, if you will, if you think of the grid in the traditional power flow, where you have, generation, transmission, distribution, and then the distribution layer, we're working to define use cases down to what the smart contracts need to look like from the top at the generation layer all the way down to the edges of the distribution layer.
Interesting. So kind of as we're moving towards the end of our time here, how can people, where do you need help? How can people get involved? How can we use this audience to say, what do we need to bring to bear to move this forward?
Yeah, I started the storyline with the ancient Babylon story, and I will continue, probably end together with you with similar story, old good Babylon Tower story, right? Everyone is talking about different languages. This is exactly summarizes our industry, right? We have different layers in power systems, communication, cybersecurity, and many other stuff. So I think the standardization and like handshaking in terms of legal issues, like smart contracts, literally, help us to reduce the misunderstanding or just increase the coordination and synchronization or orchestration, however you name it, in that tower, the entire ecosystem that we have. Everyone is talking about different language, but it doesn't matter for us. We can come to a conclusion and then consensus and build something positive for the society. Therefore, the standardization and smart contracts, both concepts, are very close concepts, which are close to each other. And I believe our efforts in standardization and in the scientific arena, there will be new extensions, especially in legislative issues as well. The United Kingdom, last week, I guess, Tamara, if I'm not mistaken, and Germany and other countries are coming up with legal and legislative issues. Then that means we expect that all over the world there will be like global events, which they will come up with like digital law and legislative issues, state-wise in the United States as well. So step by step, it will come to the other industries as well, starting from assets, cryptocurrencies, and governmental issues. And of course, we expect that there will be great extensions in the field of energy, which is one of the primary elements of our civilization in general. So that means we expect that there will be new generations of DLT, blockchain, and smart contracts coming, and which will penetrate the entire lifestyle and change many things in future, especially after pandemic times. Hopefully sometime it will be over soon. So these are like feature extensions. There will be AI, which will be penetrating to this arena, and there will be interoperability issues in terms of technical and legal issues, international and state law. Mm-hmm. So there will be challenges and solutions, like many other issues, and hopefully we will be a part of providing some solutions together with our working group to the global system as well.
Okay. How would somebody get involved?
They can join our working group. It is free for everyone. And probably Tamara, if you would like to give more details about what does it look like in our daily operations, how can a new member join?
Yeah, I apologize, Chris. We probably should have had the website handy. So, but
we can definitely link it when we put up the post in the
awesome.
in the write up. So
awesome.
We'll definitely do that.
So there's a 2418.5 working group website. There's a blockchain initiative website, and it's emailing through either of those pages if you're interested in participating. And it's we have several task forces, as we described, that focus on a specific element of blockchain and energy, whether it's cybersecurity, interoperability. We've mentioned use cases and smart contracts. So each of those groups are working on elements of what will become the standards document. And then we have the overall working group that comes together to kind of roll everything in to make sure that we're all moving in the same direction. Yeah. So, but it would practically be impossible to have too many people, too many volunteers helping in this initiative.
All right, there you go. So thanks for joining today. It's definitely been a pleasure, Umit and Tamara, to have you on. And I know this will resonate a lot with our audience. Has been very much following some of the critical infrastructure, energy systems, and security as in those areas, as well as transactive energy. Thanks a lot. You heard it here on New Cyber Frontier.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of New Cyber Frontier. Remember to get involved. Often we think that someone else will handle privacy and security in the virtual world, but you are the only one truly in command of your virtual fate. Join our mailing list so we can keep you informed of breaking news and new releases. If you have an idea, if you have a question that you would like to hear answered, or if you want to get involved with our efforts, reach out to us at NewCyberFrontier.com. We also encourage you to visit our sponsors' links, as they are the ones that really make this show possible. I want to thank each of you for supporting the show, and we look forward to seeing you back for the next episode of New Cyber Frontier.